I'm Callista.
And I'm Teresa, and this is Terrifyingly Typical True Crime. So we are in the first part of October, and I just have to say, in the Northwest, I'm loving it. We lived in Arizona for 9 years, and Halloween time, it was still over 100 degrees. It's lovely here. We haven't had too much rain. The leaves are changing. You can go for a long walk. It's just my kind of weather.
Me too, except I would prefer more rain and less sun.
I really like the concept of it being cold outside with blue skies. I know I tell you that's like my favorite weather. I know we need rain for everything to grow, but I don't know. I don't love the way the rain smells. I know that's really weird. I would, I know we need the rain, but I would prefer it just to be nice and clear. But yeah.
Fair
And
enough.
and I know you don't like to go outside. You are not a bug person. I mean, I'm not a bug person either, but it's great when it starts to cool down because there are no bugs. I mean, I'm sure they're there, but they're not they're not flying around. They're not trying to bite you. It's great.
It is great.
And let's see, Halloween time. Halloween time is coming, obviously. I don't know if we've mentioned on any of our prior episodes, but I am not a horror fan. I don't really like anything associated that's scary with Halloween. But I do like looking at stuff. Of course, that's not horror, but like in the stores. But I notice, and I don't generally buy candy for Halloween. I think I'm going to do cookies this year to hand out to the few kids that we might get. But I feel like, I remember when I feel like I'm, like a little old lady in a rocking chair complaining about the good old days. But things are just so expensive. Like large bags of candy are like, I don't know, almost $30. And I honestly, I'm not sure how many pieces are in there, but that just seems astronomical to me.
It is astronomical. I mean, on the whole, the price of groceries is astronomical,
I think I saw something the other day that it's like the highest it's been. I mean, I guess I shouldn't say, I don't know. It's just really high, obviously.
which is true.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Anything you're excited about for this month?
Yeah, I think you said that the TV adaptation of Ruth Ware's The Woman in Cabin 10 comes out this month, right?
Yeah, I'm sure it's October. I'm sure it is. If not, it's the 1st of November. But I think it's this month.
Yeah, we just got the sequel, Woman in Suite 11. And I have to say, we've really liked pretty much all of Ruth Ware's books from like her first book, which obviously authors get better over time. But even her first book we really liked, except we didn't really love The Woman in Cabin 10. And so hopefully the adaptation with Keira Knightley is better and the sequel is better.
Yeah, hopefully. I mean, I really like Keira Knightley. I'm trying to think if she's been in anything that I haven't liked. So hopefully she elevates things, which I am sure she will. And Ruth Ware's a really good writer. I think maybe we didn't. And of course, the sequel obviously has the same main character. I think her name's Lo, but I think we didn't like the character. So it's really hard, to love a book when you don't really love the main character, or I think so.
No, definitely. And I definitely didn't love, I don't want to give any spoilers, but the antagonist at the end. And just felt, I assume she's going to be in the sequel. I didn't love her. I kind of felt like I don't want to say sullied, but she didn't help the ending. So yeah, I'm not really looking forward to that.
Yeah, that's true. Is Ruth where it was her first in the Dark, Dark Wood? Is that what it's
Yeah.
called? Yeah.
Either in the Dark Dark Wood or in a Dark Dark Wood, something like that.
Okay. It might be. I think you're probably right. I really liked that one. Like you said, I liked all of them except The Woman in Cabin.
Exactly.
Was the last one the island one?
Yes.
Right?
The
Okay.
One Perfect Couple.
Yeah. I didn't think I was going to like that by the premise, but yeah, I liked that. And if you're
Yeah.
really interested in, hearing what we think of books, you can listen to our now defunct podcast, Revenge and Red Herrings, where we talk mystery books.
Yes. And we give our unfiltered opinions. And like you say, I happen to be harsh.
Well, I kind of feel like you especially, no, I think I do too, have the attitude, life is short and it's way too short for bad books, bad TV shows, bad movies. But we both read a lot. And it's really a bummer if you read a book and, you don't like the characters, the writing's bad. I mean, I would rather have characters that I don't like as opposed to bad writing. That's just, it's really hard to get past that.
Yeah. Honestly, I feel like the reason I might be harder is because I feel like I get my hopes up more for like books than I do for a TV show or movie. So when I've made it to the end and spent however many hours reading or listening, whatever, and it hasn't redeemed itself or it's gotten progressively worse, I'm like, really? Not that, it's the author's job to appeal to everyone, but I feel like that obsesses me more than in another medium.
Yeah, I know the one that I listened to and then you listened to and the one that you just finished. I don't remember the author. Do you? The Final Wife?
I want to say like Jenny Blackhurst or something, but I'm not sure that's right.
Yeah, and I think I might have I think sometimes when I read ones that aren't that great, I feel like maybe my ability to suss out if it's gonna be good or not, is dulled a little bit, and I'm like, "Oh, yeah, I'm ever hopeful like you," but then, like, it ends, and it's like, "Oh, okay, well, it's over now. It wasn't great. Maybe I'll read another book by that person." But yeah, I think maybe you think, "Oh, yeah, it's a book. It's gonna be good. It's gonna" yeah, and then when it's not, it's kinda disappointing.
Yeah, I guess my problem is that, as we all know, there are more books than one person will ever be able to read. So I'm like, the time I wasted reading this book, I could have read a better book. And that upsets me.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Yeah, and we need to I know we've been bad about that in the past, or not bad, but I think, like, like you used to them, we start the book, we must finish it. No, it's kinda like TV shows. If you can't get into it and you give it I don't know, what is your how much do you try to give for audiobooks? Like an hour and a half?
No, I'm bad. Yeah, this is my problem that my hope springs eternal. And so I go for a while, keep thinking, well, maybe it'll get better. Maybe it'll get better. So I give it like at least 2 hours usually.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I haven't read like a really or listened to or read a really bad one in a while, but I feel like sometimes I'm on not a good track and it's like 3, 4 in a row. And, by the fourth one, it's like 10 minutes in. No, I don't like it. I'm just done. you know?
I hear that.
Yeah,
Alrighty then, let's get on to the episode.
sounds good.
For this week's installment, in part two of our theme on female killer nurses, we're traveling back in time to the dark, grimy streets of Victorian England. Although the period may have taken its name from Queen Victoria's 1837 to 1901 reign, far from the luxury of Buckingham Palace and the affluence of the growing middle class, a third of the population lived in poverty in this age of industrialization. Cholera outbreaks were common due to the lack of sanitation in the shoddily built tenements, in which an entire family was forced to share a single room. With an average life expectancy of only 42, the working class would spend their short lives at the factories, mines, docks, and mills. Despite the idealized childhoods of Victoria and Albert's 9 children, over 25% of Victorian children died before reaching the age of 5.
I mean, that's bloody bleak.
That is the word of the day. Because, as we'll see, many never even got close to their fifth birthday. Prepare for the bleakness characteristic of a Dickens novel because in our two-part series on Amelia Dyer, we're drawing back the lace curtain on the chillingly called baby farming business.
As has been the fate of unmarried mothers throughout history, single mothers found themselves in need of this service because of the considerable stigma surrounding their circumstances, which made earning enough to care for themselves and their children an often impossible feat. Their status as fallen women meant even charities hesitated to offer assistance in case it hurt their reputation. The workhouse was an option, but the conditions were deplorable. Inmates were given uniforms after being bathed and examined, while women were spared from the physical labor demanded of the men who were expected to crush bones and break stones. They were separated from the rest of their family as they performed domestic chores and were only allowed to see their children for a few hours per week. Considering that each person was only offered an additional 137 to 182 ounces of food a week beyond the customary gruel and soup, it was no wonder that the rate of infant mortality inside was over 90%.
If they avoided the workhouse, the only paths left to unwed mothers were prostitution or starvation. If the term child support is springing to mind, you should know that the Poor Law Amendment Act of 1834 essentially lifted any financial obligation from the father. So, in the name of deterring illegitimacy, single mothers were left well and truly fucked.
I'd like to say I'm surprised by that, but I'm not.
It's always the woman's fault and thus her responsibility.
Look, just like today.
History is doomed to repeat itself.
True.
As for other options, illegal, incredibly dangerous abortion still happened, of course. But the British Abortion Act, which legalized the procedure, wasn't introduced until 1967 and didn't take effect until 1968. With death or prison a likely outcome of any attempted abortion, and orphanages as a last resort, some mothers considered fostering or adoption. They knew that to have any respectability, they would have to give their children up. However, this wasn't a much better choice because unless they attempted to get the child taken in by an organization like the Foundling Hospital in London, at large, the lack of laws around adoption meant that baby farmers had free reign. The older married women who commonly operated as baby farmers served as agents who would put the babies up for fostering or adoption for a fee. Some truly helped the children that came into their care, others did not. It was hardly in their best financial interest to throw money away raising a child for 18 years if they could kill them soon after collecting their fee instead. And the tragic reality at the time was that some desperate mothers viewed their child's death at the hands of a baby farmer as perhaps not the preferred option, but one of the very few they had left.
As a prime example of the somber social fabric of Victorian England, Amelia Hobley was born the year Queen Victoria took the throne, 1837, in the small village of Pyle Marsh, east of Bristol. As the youngest girl to a family with 5 surviving children, and we say surviving because 2 others died before Amelia turned 6, one of these siblings was also 6 when she died from inflammation of the brain. Amelia's other sister was only 5 months old at the time of her death. Continuing with the misery, her mother, Sarah Hobley, contracted typhus fever. The illness resulted in hallucinations, delusions, impaired speech, and bouts of mania. Young Amelia helped care for her increasingly ill mother, who died from meningitis when Amelia was 10. All that said, Samuel Hobley, Amelia's father, was a well regarded and well off shoemaker, so Amelia, unlike many of her lower middle class peers, was given a proper education and didn't leave her Catholic school until the age of 14. Fittingly for the religious family, Amelia's remaining siblings all grew up to pursue honest careers. Her eldest brother, Thomas, followed in their father's footsteps in becoming a shoemaker. James became a ship's carpenter. William, who was only 2 years older than Amelia, became a carver and cabinet maker. And her sister Anne worked as a housekeeper.
An intelligent child, Amelia made the most of her education. She read widely, wrote well, and loved poetry. But her chances of bettering her prospects took a hit once she finished school and was sent to live with her aunt in the Bristol marketplace. While we can only guess why her father packed her off to her aunt's house, we do know that this resulted in her estrangement with the rest of the family, as her other siblings stayed close to their father until he passed away. At the age of 15, Amelia trained as an apprentice corset maker while living with her aunt. Although the garment industry guarded the virtue and developed the skills of young girls, children were not protected from exploitation, and Amelia's apprenticeship likely mirrored many others with unsafe conditions and long hours.
The day before Amelia turned 22, she lost her second parent, 11 years after the first. Still estranged from the rest of her family after her father's death from bronchitis in 1859, Amelia left her aunt's home for a boarding house. It was in the shared accommodation that 23-year-old Amelia met, wait for it, 57-year-old George Thomas, a successful carver and gilder, George Thomas was firmly middle class with a married son to show for his first marriage. George and Amelia married 5 months after his wife's death in 1861. The lack of a formal ceremony and family members to celebrate their union at the Bristol Register's office, as well as the couple's rush to the aisle, fueled the rumors of their illicit affair while his first wife was still alive. Even if their relationship hadn't started off with deceit, their marriage certainly did because Amelia lessened the more than 30-year age gap between herself and her new husband by pretending to be 30 on their marriage certificate. 2 years after marrying George, Amelia became one of the first trainee nurses at the Bristol Royal Infirmary in 1863. While rotating between the surgical, general, and medical wards every 3 months, Amelia witnessed untold pain, injuries, and diseases on her grueling 16-hour shifts. With underdeveloped medication and anesthesia as the treatment at the time, Amelia had to be able to care for patients without becoming emotionally involved. Whether out of necessity or ambition, given the rarity of a working, married, middle class woman, Amelia was more than up to the task of remaining hard hearted.
The familiarity Amelia had developed with death as a child only grew as she trained as a monthly nurse. In her role of caring for mothers after childbirth, most often for a month,
Hence the name.
quite, she would help in the aftermath of childbirth, such as by bringing the baby for breastfeeding. But her duties also encompassed laying out the dead, including the many infants who died soon after entering the wretched world of Victorian England. Her budding nursing career was stopped short, though, because upon becoming pregnant with her first child in 1864, Amelia was legally obligated to quit once she started a show.
I mean, did people think babies came from fairies or storks?
I mean, any honorable woman wouldn't be out and about in her condition. Could her husband not provide for her? The scandal.
Gotta love the patriarchy.
It's the best. Around the time of her daughter, Ellen Thomas's birth, Amelia became friends with a midwife named Ellen Dane. At the age of 26, Amelia learned about her new friend's business model of housing unmarried pregnant women and fostering or adopting their babies. She heard all about the many takers for the services Ellen advertised in the newspapers. As soon as Ellen had the babies in her possession, she would pocket most of the money she charged for taking them in instead of using it to adequately feed them. She'd then drug the infants with an opiate based sugary syrup, alternately called Godfrey's Cordial, Mother's Friend, or the Quietness, due to its use of quieting, sometimes permanently, a hungry or unhappy baby.
I mean, the quietness sounds like both the title and the plot of a horror movie.
It totally does.
Familiar with midwifery and interested in Ellen's line of work, after her husband George died in 1869 from diarrhea.
Oh, the joys of being alive back in the day.
Jesus, with lack of sanitation, it's not surprising.
Definitely not.
Amelia was suddenly a single mother who could benefit from the booming baby farming business. Although her late husband had left her a bit of money, Amelia was also supporting some extended family living in the city, further draining her very limited resources. Given that her father's inheritance had gone straight to her husband instead of her, which is really messed up.
But imagine a woman handling the finances. She'd probably spend the lot in a week.
I mean, one of the greatest ills of society is perceiving women as the weaker sex.
Too true.
Having farmed her daughter Ellen out to be raised elsewhere for the next few years, and that's nice.
Yeah, I do wonder if that was out of necessity or convenience, but I lean more towards the former at this point.
I mean, we can't have her getting in the way, expecting to be parented and such.
Imagine.
Amelia took out advertisements under the names of Mrs. Harding and Mrs. Smith in a likely bid to avoid detection and sound like a decent married woman. as she connected with other baby farmers who traded the children of desperate mothers for profit. And thus, Amelia began baby farming with a lying in home or a house of confinement in Totterdown, a suburb of Bristol. She would let in unmarried women unable to hide their progressing pregnancies for a fee. Some of these women would even ask for their ill fated newborns to be smothered at birth, knowing that Victorian coroners couldn't differentiate between stillbirth and suffocation. God, that's grim.
Isn't it? If she didn't kill them immediately, Amelia would make the most of her weekly fee of around 5 shillings or 25 pence for fostering the babies by either starving them, which also allowed her to keep the money she would have spent on food, or drugging them with daily doses of the quietness over a period of time. She would drug the babies into a vegetative state, then simply wait for them to die.
I mean, I feel like I need another word for bleak or grim.
They pretty much sum it up, though. Loath as the police were to try and get a warrant on suspicion of wrongdoing to go after baby farmers operating from their homes, by the late 1860s, Scotland Yard had mustered up the energy to investigate, and Sergeant Richard Ralph began looking into the deaths of 18 babies in Brixton. When the police searched the home of Brixton's sisters, Sarah Ellis and Margaret Waters, in connection to the case, they found that 5 of the 9 babies on the premises were dying from opium and malnutrition. Sarah, a separated single mother of one, was acquitted of murder because of insufficient evidence. Instead, she was convicted of obtaining money under false pretenses and given 18 months of hard labor. Her sister Margaret was far less lucky.
Margaret was a widow whose endeavors to work as a landlady and open a reputable business had been unsuccessful. After these failures exasperated her financial insecurity, she decided to try her hand at baby farming. Her career would end with her conviction of the death of a child called Cohen and execution by hanging on October 11th, 1870. That said, her case wasn't quite as straightforward as the police may have claimed. While the fact that the children in her home were unclean, malnourished, and ill spoke of neglect, that label fails to consider the resources of many unmarried working class mothers who could have done their best and still wound up with dead children due to their living conditions. We're not arguing that Margaret wasn't guilty, but we are saying that justice wasn't done because the others who shared the blame didn't face the same consequences. Even though the investigation exposed the involvement of several doctors, a lack of evidence and a bias in favor of learned medical men meant that many got off scot free.
Amelia had a connection to one such practitioner named Dr. Harding, who performed illegal abortions. Although she might have been inspired to use his name as one of her aliases, their connection couldn't be definitively proven. In another narrow escape, Amelia was believed to have been offloading some of the infants she wasn't slowly killing in her house of confinement to Margaret Waters and other baby farmers for a substantial return. Yet, an investigation into this practice was never launched. Following the arrests and executions of various other baby farmers, Amelia took a brief break from the business in 1869 when she took up nursing again at the Bristol Lunatic Asylum at Fish Ponds.
Lovely name.
It was later changed, but that was how it was referred to at the time, which had opened its doors a decade earlier in response to the overcrowding at St. Peter's Hospital, then Bristol's workhouse and psychiatric institution. In her role, Amelia assisted inmates with daily tasks like dressing and bathing, restrained violent patients, and dispensed opiates to those experiencing depression and suicidal thoughts. Although she didn't enjoy the tiresome routines to which nurses and patients were forced to abide, Amelia learned firsthand how one would go about faking symptoms to escape such abject poverty that a stay in the asylum offered a sort of retreat.
I mean, the conditions are beyond deplorable when Faking symptoms to have a respite in an asylum is the better option.
Right.
While the real reason Amelia left in 1871 isn't known, the circumstances at the Bristol Lunatic Asylum would have given her a lengthy list to choose from. There was corruption, disastrous documentation, a high patient death rate, and violence in the form of nurses abusing patients. Even if poor patient treatment didn't bother Amelia, the rampant sexism that saw doctors connecting madness to female sexuality, oh my God, of course.
You didn't think we'd be able to avoid that gem of misogyny, did you?
Fortunately, no. This view translated to little respect for female nurses. All that said, there were rumors that Amelia was fired because of mistreating a patient. With the Bristol Lunatic Asylum behind her, in 1872, Amelia met and married 27-year-old William Dyer. William wasn't as educated or as socially well placed as Amelia. He worked as a laborer at a vinegar factory and had never had the opportunity to learn how to read, as evidenced by his decision to mark his marriage certificate with the letter X rather than with his name. More importantly to Amelia, though, he didn't question her when she once again lied about her age, this time claiming to be 29 instead of 34. Nor did he object to having her daughter Ellen live with them after having been raised elsewhere for almost 7 years.
In addition to her daughter from her first marriage, Amelia had two children with William. In 1873, Amelia gave birth to a daughter named Mary, but who was called Polly, apparently because it was so close to Molly, which was also a common nickname for Mary. 3 years later, the Dyers welcomed a son, also named William, to the family. They lived a quiet life for a few years with a lodger who shared the rent. But then, William was fired from the vinegar refinery in 1877 when the higher ups decided to make cost saving cuts. Now, the sole breadwinner, Amelia decided she'd save her family from the workhouse by going back to helping women who found themselves in the family way. From 1877 onward, a plethora of pregnant women would come to deliver their children in Amelia's home, leaving Amelia with up to 6 babies in her care at a time. Amelia's oldest daughter, Ellen, thought that although 7 children had died in their home, they were doing their utmost to treat them well. Polly, on the other hand, was quick to observe their pallor and constant cries. But with frequent administrations of the quietness, the babies would sleep for most of the time, sometimes even through their feeding times, which led to Amelia forgetting to give them their bottle on more than one occasion.
I mean, small mercy that they were asleep most of the time, I guess.
Yeah.
All three of Amelia's children would follow their mother's instructions by preparing bottles or dashing to the drugstore for more of the sinisterly named opiate syrup. Amelia herself relied on the laudanum that featured as one of its ingredients. Cheaper than straight alcohol, this 10% solution of opium powder mixed into alcohol dulled Amelia's painful toothache and was easily accessible at any druggist's for patients in pain. With laudanum and brandy bottles clinking against each other in her apron pocket and her coffers overflowing with coins, Amelia took in more and more children. But even after consuming a minimum of 2 bottles of laudanum a day, her stress and fatigue mounted as the children she adopted and failed to care for became sick with diarrhea and red gum. Despite the children's illnesses and her worsening mood, Amelia kept answering and taking out advertisements in local newspapers in which she offered to adopt a baby in exchange for everything the mother had for the child, such as their clothing and a 10 to 20 pound fee, which doesn't sound like a lot now, but back then, a general servant typically made 14 pounds a year. For those who truly believed they were doing right by their child, Amelia would sell herself as part of a respectable, married, childless couple eager to raise a family in their country home. With visions of the orchard just beyond this loving home, the women bought into the fantasy she carefully constructed.
When the seemingly believable nurse came to meet these clients, she would reassure them that she'd get their child a safe home. She would even sometimes promise concerned mothers that they were free to visit. But instead of giving their children a better life, Amelia took the money and murdered most of the children within days of procuring them, even killing one defenseless infant the very day she was entrusted with its care.
I want to say, Jesus, everything is so horrific and hopeless every few minutes.
You wouldn't be wrong. To avoid detection, Amelia was constantly uprooting the family. Wherever they went, though, the Dyers' new home had to be near a railway station. This escape route also served as a convenient place for her to meet mothers and other baby farmers. Amelia may have been a risk taker, but the ones she made were always calculated. She might have been able to rationalize the many deaths with the idea that the children would be better off in heaven than unwanted and unloved on earth, but she still knew that her operation had to remain far from prying eyes and nosy neighbors. To that end, she would have the pregnant women travel under the cover of darkness, then drop their babies off in secret locations. In spite of the covert nature of her business, babies were dying at an alarming, unmissable rate. Occasionally, 3 babies would die in only 5 days. While quite a few doctors were happy to unthinkingly document the deaths as either atrophy or marasmus, another wasting disease common in young children in Victorian England, for some, Amelia had to concoct a story to make it seem as if the death had been natural, to avoid raising police suspicion with too many unexplainable death certificates. She also had to keep up a constant stream of lies to her husband, as well as to the mothers to assure them that the babies they had handed over were alive and well, not dead or in a similarly appalling situation with another baby farmer.
As hard as she had tried to outrun it, the law caught up with her in 1879 when the Bristol city coroner launched an inquest into the deaths of 2 children in Amelia's care after a few surgeons started to give the number of certified deaths Amelia was reporting a second look. In the name of finding out if natural causes really had claimed all these lives, the autopsy of a young girl took place in Amelia's parlor. Apparently, home autopsies in front of family members were nothing out of the ordinary at the time.
I mean, if a public hanging is a family outing, why not watch an autopsy for a fun Friday afternoon?
I mean, I guess it's hard to fathom the environment in which they all lived.
True, but humans have always had a taste for the macabre.
Oh, isn't that the truth? As the police investigation took off, Amelia swallowed an overdose of laudanum, which left her confused, sick to her stomach, and not up to answering the investigators' questions. Convenient. She raged even as she struggled to breathe and yelled that she couldn't go on. Regardless of her poor condition, Amelia was arrested on August 26, 1879. Her children watched on in terror as their mother was taken to an unknown location in a black van. William did his best to comfort them by saying that their mother was off to the country for a much needed break. But Ellen, the oldest of the three, decided it was time to make her own way in the world. And once her mother was carted off, she married and moved to London. As for the rest of the family, having been laid off from the vinegar refinery once again, William settled for a low paying gig helping an invalid man. Initially anxious after Amelia's arrest, Polly and her brother William were soon able to become normal school children, free from the stench of death and the worry of discovery of the baby farm they lived in. Are her children going to have better, if not happy lives now? I mean, I feel like maybe not.
Unfortunately, not many of the people we hear about fare well. As close as Amelia had come to facing serious charges, she was ultimately acquitted of attempted suicide and due to insufficient evidence, unsophisticated medical and legal procedures, and varying expert opinions. Her first trial ended in a conviction of gross negligence of the children in her care rather than murder. Even the autopsy of the young girl had ended in a finding of natural causes. Still, Amelia was found to be a negligent, unregistered caregiver, which was in violation of the 1872 Infant Life Protection Act. This act had been introduced after the Sarah Ellis and Margaret Waters case to ensure that every house with more than one child under the age of 12 months taken in for a fee for over 24 hours was registered. And it stated that only reputable foster mothers and appropriate accommodations were to be given licenses.
I mean, I'm guessing this wasn't widely enforced.
As far as I could see, the loopholes in acts like these were big enough to drive a truck through.
I'm sure.
For her crimes, on August 29th, 1879, Amelia was sentenced to 6 months of hard labor at Shepton Mallet Prison, and her once difficult life turned unbearable. She and the rest of the prisoners were called only by their assigned numbers and were ordered to remain silent throughout the day as they spent hours picking oakum, which consisted of unraveling tar covered rope to be reused in ship construction. Without the use of tools, the inmates' fingers would bleed and their nails would tear. Any prisoner who objected to this harsh existence faced days of solitary confinement in the dark.
Although Amelia regained her freedom in February 1880, she came out a worse version of herself. Her weight had plummeted and her teeth had begun to decay. She resorted to hiding her hardened hands and weakened fingernails underneath her apron. In her first 6 months on the outside, Amelia went back to corset making and earned an honest living as a forewoman. Even though corsets were ubiquitous to achieve the sought after waif like waist, Amelia's salary didn't reflect the demand, and her long days entailed disciplining the teenage girls working the machines as their mistakes would reflect on her. Amelia left the job as soon as she could. Fortunately for her, that opportunity came in 1881 when her husband borrowed some money to relocate the family from Totterdown to St. James Square, where he began working at a brewery. For the one and only move instigated by William to give them all a fresh start, Amelia attempted to establish a more legitimate business by opening a general store that also provided laundry services. However, the annual rent of £100 was a non starter in their financial situation, and no one was going to give a woman a loan without her husband acting as a surrogate.
So the Dyers started a series of short term moves that would see them occasionally taking ownership of a house on a Saturday, only to leave it for good the following Tuesday. And beginning with their 1884 relocation to fish ponds, Amelia reestablished her baby farming business. As familiar as the work was, the clientele was a bit different this time around. Now, wealthier women were turning to Amelia. Seeing all of their disposable income as hers for the taking, Amelia placed more advertisements and switched up the language to ask for children of gentle birth, whom she promised to raise as her own.
I mean, I assume this means children born of aristocratic parents?
I assume. With the influx of money between 1884 and 1888, Amelia could afford to have opulent infant funerals to keep up the pretense that the various undertakers were removing the bodies of well cared for children who had died from natural causes. Now, each move brought with it a better property that could house a rented piano, a sure sign that the family was firmly middle class. But the more their appearances improved, the more the Dyers' lived reality deteriorated. Amelia and William argued constantly. As Amelia guarded her many secrets, her husband drew into himself. Although William was pulling his weight and found another laborer position at a different factory in 1885, Amelia largely ignored him and refused to consult him about any household decisions. From 1886 onward, Amelia cranked up her cruelty towards all the children in her home, including her own. She would make them lie to their father and wouldn't shy away from violence.
Unwilling as she was to consider anyone but herself, Amelia was forced to make a change when a mother working as a governess came back in 1890 to ask for her child after the father's family greenlighted their marriage. Amelia responded that she had adopted the child for a friend and had already made the handoff. But the couple refused to abandon their attempt to regain their child and went to the Bristol police. After the parents knocked on her door with a police constable, Amelia knew she needed to embark on another new career path. So Amelia tugged her cloak of respectability tighter around herself and started working as a nurse in a home for women with health problems and physical limitations. The well bred ladies at the home trusted this seemingly kind hearted nurse to care for them. And Amelia adored the affluent atmosphere. Of course she did. But after only a matter of months, Amelia reluctantly took her leave when Polly became at risk of being arrested for the unpaid rent on their home and belongings. With her husband unable to help after he lost another job, Amelia told her 18-year-old daughter to sell the rented piano. When it was discovered that it wasn't theirs to sell, Polly pretended she didn't know it was a rental, and Amelia got a loan to pay off the debt. Still, they were in dire financial straits, including the Dyer's two adopted children, 7-year-old Annie and 4-year-old Alfred. This family of six was living well beyond their means.
In a familiar pattern, Amelia relocated her family and reopened her baby farming business. When it looked like the police were on her tail again in November 1891, Amelia grabbed a sharp knife and attempted to slash her throat while speaking at the voices who said Polly wanted to kill her. Although the doctor noticed that Amelia only had superficial scratches on her neck, after Polly confirmed that her mother was violent, Amelia was sent to the Gloucester County Asylum, where she was deemed to be a danger to herself and others. In the course of 2 weeks, Amelia went from raving that she shouldn't be allowed to live to staying calm to showing concern for the other patients. After 2 months, Amelia was labeled as recovered and released in January 1892. Some firmly stand by the theory that Amelia pretended to be insane to avoid prosecution. Others see her behavior as a characteristic display of abuse and withdrawal from drugs and alcohol. Another group believes that she really was unwell. Whatever the truth may be, Amelia's symptoms made multiple reappearances.
In December 1893, Amelia again became depressed and violent, saying she was tired of living. Dr. Frederick Thomas Bishop Logan, that's a mouthful,
Gotta fill up those business cards.
came to examine her on December 24th, 1893, and had barely been in her presence a minute when Amelia jumped up from her seat and grabbed the poker. She then proceeded to threaten to beat him over the head with it. He wrestled the poker away, then began questioning her. When Amelia claimed that the birds were telling her to kill herself, Polly confirmed that her mother had tried to take her own life. Having witnessed Amelia's violence and delusions, Dr. Logan certified that she was insane due to a brain disease, and she was taken to the Somerset and Bath Pauper Lunatic Asylum. Even though her depression was noted, Amelia soon improved, and she was released after only 2 weeks in January 1894. Is 2 weeks the extent that she can play the part of asylum patient?
Or the longest she wants to stay there.
Following the second stint in the asylum, Amelia and William's rocky marriage finally reached a breaking point, and the pair split. Over the next few months, Amelia flitted from home to home with her children. New adopted children were constantly appearing and disappearing, but when Amelia's 18-year-old son, William, joined the Royal Navy and Polly became engaged, Amelia was faced with a future filled with loneliness.
To make matters worse, 3 months after Amelia was discharged from the Somerset and Bath Pauper Lunatic Asylum, the same governess, still determined to get her child back, identified Amelia for the police. The police tracked Amelia down on April 26, 1894, but no arrest was ever made. Perhaps because later that afternoon, Amelia attempted to drown herself. While some have said that the river was too shallow for her to drown in, she was nonetheless found in a ditch near Cumberland Basin and taken to the Bristol General Hospital, where the house surgeon, Dr. J. Lacey Firth, began treating her. Dr. Firth first laid eyes on the shivering Amelia in the hours after she was admitted. After an unnamed man visited her, Dr. Firth asked his new patient about him and the governess's lost child, whom Amelia admitted to having cared for but remained tight lipped about. Although she was certainly depressed and refused to eat in the 13 days she stayed there, Dr. Firth wouldn't have gone so far as to diagnose her as insane.
Yet, on the recommendation of the doctors who had treated her, she admitted herself to the asylum. She came in with barely 2 coins to rub together after a day of travel and no food. The doctors witnessed her distress, but they held out hope that she would be better by the end of her time with them. On the final day of her third stay in the asylum, none of her family members showed up to collect her. So an attendant accompanied her home.
Which is a sad image, but she's done some shit.
Yeah, I can't garner any sympathy for her.
I hear that.
Amelia had spent the early 1890s moving around Bristol, from Wells Road to Oxford Street to Horfield to Montpelier, all the while taking out advertisements for those looking for someone to nurse or adopt their children. As eager to avoid the authorities' attention as she was to escape poverty, Amelia continued to trod down the well worn path of baby farming. As for what became of the children in her care when she went into the asylum, 3 of them were spared death at Amelia's hands, only to end up toiling away in the workhouse.
Soon, Amelia would find her own miserable situation mirroring that of her former charges. Amelia finished her final stint in the asylum back in Gloucester County in 1894. But this was far from a relaxing retreat. Amelia wrote to her daughter of her time in this harrowing environment by saying, "I have no soul. My soul was hammered out of me at Gloucester Asylum." Her taste of freedom was fleeting because Amelia soon found herself at Bristol's Barton Regis workhouse in the beginning of 1895. In the workhouse, Amelia met a 70-year-old nurse named Jane Smith. The woman Amelia called Granny had lost 3 children earlier in life. After her husband died, she lost her home too and was forced to enter the workhouse. Preying on Jane's awareness that she could have years left in this abominable institution before she became so physically incapacitated that she'd be sent to the infirmary, Amelia said she'd treat her like a sister and made false promises of an equal partnership. Jane knew that Amelia had been in the asylum, but in the beginning, she didn't seem like a dangerous woman. She seemed like her last hope.
I don't think I'm getting ahead of myself when I say poor Jane, because I'm guessing things are going to end badly for her.
Compared to some of the others, she didn't do too badly, although that's relative to the time, of course.
Alrighty. After Amelia left the workhouse in June 1895, she stayed in Bristol for a couple of weeks before she and Jane moved in with her daughter and son in law. Although William hadn't consented to his daughter's marriage, Amelia had felt her blessing was more than enough, and Polly had married a successful tradesman named Arthur Palmer earlier that year. Once the four were living together, Jane watched on as Amelia doted on her cats by buying them special food. Amelia indulged herself in the same way by eating expensive food and keeping a constant supply of oil to rub into her newly softened hands every night. By contrast, the other 3 were left with only the essentials. Amelia, who Jane chillingly called Mother, was in charge of the money and would dole it out to Jane when she needed it. Jane cared about the babies Amelia brought in, but had enough self interest to swallow Amelia's story about returning them to their mothers at the train station whenever they vanished. Jane must have thought the situation would sort itself out when the police started looking into Amelia's involvement in the case of a little boy who was abandoned at a train station. Unfortunately for Amelia's future victims, her day of judgment hadn't yet arrived.
And with that spoiler that Amelia's career of killing children would eventually come to a close, we'll have to wait until next week to learn about the murders that heralded her downfall.
All the sources we used for this episode are in the show notes below. If you'd like to suggest a case or theme for us to discuss, you can email us at terrifyinglytypicalpodcast@gmail.com. You can also follow us at Terrifying the Typical Podcast on Instagram and at Terrifying the Typical Pod on TikTok. Feel free to leave us a comment, rating, or review to let us know what you think. We'd love to hear your opinions.
See you next week.